Let's talk about flypaper. An old but innovative way to get rid of flies. Right? You hang the thing from the ceiling and then you pull down on the bottom, and as you pull down, out comes this strip of super sticky stuff. I don't know what, a film of some kind, right? And as the flies fly around, they're attracted to that flypaper stuff, and when they land on it, thinking they're about to get some treat, right? Or they land and then they get stuck. And there's no way to get free. Once you are a fly stuck on the fly paper, you are there for life, literally. Fly paper is not just an old and innovative way to get rid of flies. It happens to be one of the two positive nicknames I had during high school. And it came from when we used to play flag football in gym class. When we were playing flag football, I would play on the defensive side, and I was always pushed out to the outside to cover the receivers. And I would cover them, I'd run with them and stick right with them. And one day somebody said to me, "You cover receivers like fly paper. You stick to them and there is no getting free." And somebody else like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And so that became my nickname when we were in gym class playing flag football. I was fly paper. Well, that whole fly paper thing doesn't matter a whole lot, and it wouldn't bother me at all if you just completely forgot that. But I want to talk about nicknames for just a second. Nicknames can be a shortened version of our name, but there's another type of nickname, like the type that I had, where it's a descriptive name. It's a word, it's a name that describes something about them. And so with one word, they could describe the way I played flag football and covered receivers. In a similar kind of way, Jesus had a nickname. This isn't a name, as far as I can tell, that people called him. When people around him, they called him Jesus, right? Yeah, and it's not a title that he had, like Christ or the Messiah. So I'm going to put it in the category of nickname. It's a descriptive name, but maybe not necessarily what people called him. We're in Matthew chapter 1. Look at verse 20. It's talking about Joseph. "But after he'd considered these things, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, 'Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, because what has been conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She'll give birth to a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he'll save his people from their sins.' Now all this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. 'See, the virgin will become pregnant and will give birth to a son, and they will name him Emmanuel,' which is translated, God with us." Whether people called him Emmanuel or not isn't the point. The point is this: the description is 100% accurate. Jesus is God with us. And so you could call him Emmanuel. It is a short one-word nickname, if you will, that gives us the description of who he is, something about him. He is God with us. Now, this concept of God with us may not sound shocking to 21st century Christians who've read the entire Bible, but consider that God with us is practically impossible. A few weeks ago in this same series, we talked about how Moses wanted to see God, and God's like, "You can't see my face and live through it." And we saw in the New Testament, the same thing was said, that you can't see God and live through it. Friends, if we can't see God and live, we certainly can't have him live with us. The separation, the distinction between him and us, his holiness and our sinfulness is so great. We can't see God and live. Well, we certainly can't have him live with us. So God with us, that should be a shocking concept to us because it's practically impossible. But second, especially to the folks back in Old Testament Israel, those days, this was a shocking thing because it was a religious anomaly. See, the gods of the other religions, they live separately from the followers. Oh, they might come down from time to time and check in on them. They might harass them. They might bless them, right? But they didn't live among them. They kept at their distance because, yeah, there is this huge distinction between the gods and humans. But our God, the God of the Bible, is an anomaly. God refuses to live apart from his people. I could just think about it throughout the ages. Garden of Eden. God walked with Adam and Eve each evening. They had something special, right, with God. Something even better than the perfect world that they lived in. They had unhindered friendship with their Creator. God didn't live apart from them. He came and he spent the evenings with them. They walked together, they talked together, they enjoyed each other's company. Unfortunately, one day, Adam and Eve distrusted and disobeyed God, and as a result, they were flooded with shame and guilt, and ever since then, mankind has been helplessly and hopelessly incompatible with God. But God refused to let it end that way. God started again. This time he started with Abram and Abram's descendants, who we know as the nation of Israel. Years later, immediately after God miraculously delivered Israel, God showed his desire to be among them. He led them out of Egypt, and then as they were there in the wilderness area, just on the other side of the Red Sea, he led them with a pillar of fire. They could see. There was this cloud, right, and a pillar of fire. And I think what the message was to them is that God is visibly in the vicinity, right? God is nearby, but wanting more for them. God gave instructions for the tabernacle. And through a system of priests and sacrifices and safeguards, God lived among his people. He wasn't visible to them, not accessible by the rank and file, but still among his people. And that continued through the tabernacle days. It continued on with the temple. And then we come to Jesus. And now things change. It's God with us, as we saw in Matthew chapter 1. John 1:14, John writes, the Word, that's another name for Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us. And then, as Jesus' time here on earth is coming to a close, knowing how much his presence meant to his disciples, he said something incredible to them just before he returned to heaven. Matthew 28, verse 20, Jesus says this, and remember, I am with you always, to the end of the age. Right before leaving, he says, I'm with you always. Jesus found a way to stay with his disciples, even though he was no longer going to be visibly present in their lives. While visibly absent, God is still with us in the form of the Holy Spirit. And someday, Jesus will return for his people and take them to live with him and his Father in heaven. Friends, Christmas is a celebration of God's persistence in finding a way to be with us. Among other things, Christmas is a celebration of God's persistence in finding a way to be with us. He has refused to give in and give up. He keeps finding a way to be with us. We have possibly lost our sense of shock and awe at the concept of God with us. It's likely that we've also lost our sense of just what a blessing God's presence is. So I want to hit just two things very quickly about what a blessing it is to have God's presence with us. First, God's presence is better than God's favor. We're going to look at Moses again. In Exodus chapter 33, we find out that shortly after God rescued Israel from Egypt, they dishonored him big time in a massive, massive way. It was an epic fail. And so the Lord, this is Exodus 33, verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go up from here, you and the people you brought up from the land of Egypt, to the land that I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I'll give it to your offspring. I'll send an angel ahead of you, and we'll drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go up with you because you are a stiff-necked people. Otherwise, I might destroy you on the way." God's saying to Moses, "Moses, yep, some promises were made by me that you would get to this land, this special place I prepared for you, a nation home for you and the rest of the Israelites. But I'm not going to go with you. Because it's really obvious to me. These people don't respect me. And so I might, somewhere along the way, destroy them. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to stay in heaven, so to speak, and I'm going to send an angel along. And the angel will go ahead of you, and he will fight the battles for you. So you'll have my favor, right? You'll have this angel to fight for you, and he will drive out your enemies. You'll have my favor, but you won't have my presence." And I think Moses understood something that many times I fail to grasp, and perhaps you do as well. Catch this. This is verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, "Look, you've told me, lead this people up, but you've not let me know whom you'll send with me. You said, I know you by name, and you've also found favor with me. Now, if I have indeed found favor with you, please teach me your ways, and I'll know you so that I may find favor with you. Now, consider that this nation is your people." And God replied, "My presence will go with you, and I'll give you rest." Verse 15, "If your presence does not go," Moses responded to him, "don't make us go up from here. How will it be known that I and your people have found favor with you unless you go with us? I and your people will be distinguished by this from all the other people on the face of the earth." Moses understood that God's presence with him is better than an angel to fight his battles for him. So many times, I fall for the lie that says, what I need right now, more than God's presence, more than God himself, I need something from God more than I need God. Right? I need relief from this problem I'm facing, from this emotional angst or this anxiety or this regret or this fear. Or God, I need your healing. I need your help. I need you to change someone's mind. I need you to change my circumstances. So many times I fall for that lie that I need something from God more than I need God himself. Moses seemed to understand that that's not reality. That is indeed a lie. I love how Moses also said to God, "God, your presence is the distinguishing characteristic of your people. It's what makes them different. And it's what gives them assurance of your acceptance." God's presence is better than God's favor. Second, God's presence gives us the courage to face anything. Moses again. This time he's right near the end of his life. He's reminding Israel of some important things before he goes to meet his Maker. And he's going to talk to his successor, Joshua, as well, remind him of a couple of really important things before he goes. And Moses, in this speech, tells Israel, listen, don't fear your enemies, no matter how fierce they may be. And don't fear any insurmountable obstacles to receiving what God's promised you. Because God is with you. God is present with you. Deuteronomy 31, verse 6, "Be strong and courageous. Don't be terrified or afraid of them, for the Lord your God is the one who will go with you. He will not leave you or abandon you." Moses then summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you will go with this people into the land the Lord swore to give to their ancestors. You will enable them to take possession of it, The Lord is the one who will go before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or abandon you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. To us who live in the new covenant age, there's a similar message for us about not having to be afraid because God is present with us. This is Hebrews 13, verse 5. Keep your life free from the love of money. Be satisfied with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you or abandon you. Therefore, we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? We don't fear poverty. We don't fear people because God is present with us. Friends, there is no greater blessing God could bestow on humanity than his presence with him. Jesus gave us his presence for Christmas. Christmas, among other things, is a celebration of God's persistence in finding a way to be with his people. And because Jesus came, we have God with us, and his presence with us makes all the difference. Man, as that sinks in, as that the reality sinks in, as I meditate on it and grasp a hold of that, and the implications of that also sink in for my life, man, I come to that point where I'm like, I had to celebrate this Christmas. Celebrate with me. God with us.